All right, so this is part 2 of my discussion. So this session I want to explain how we can leverage the Unix shell or terminal as a troubleshooting tool. Now, since my environment that I live in spans the globe, so the company I work for, VF Corporation, they're the parent company that owns North Face, Timberland, Vans, Wrangler, Lee, Dickies, companies across the globe. They're apparel and footwear companies, so I deal with designers and executives. And one of the things that the security team has told me is that I can't remote into people's computers without them giving me explicit permission, which is fine. I respect that, right? But I have a problem where my designers will think, they'll ask me to do something, and I'm juggling 4 and 5 of them sometimes. And I'll say, hold on, I'm going to go and work in this session for a minute because I'm dealing with, let's say, the North Face, which is in Alameda, California, Vans, which is in Costa Mesa, right? And I might be dealing with Stabio, which is in Switzerland, right? So I'm dealing with, multiple geographic locations and uses, and sometimes language is an interesting barrier, right? I don't speak anything but poor English, right? So I can't necessarily rely on using a tool like ARD or VNC because users will get up and leave me. And when I go back to their computers, their screens are locked, and I can't get back in. So to eliminate that problem, I only work in terminal. Unless I really have dedicated time with them, I can say, you're going to be working with me, and we're going to do something together remotely. So I want to show you what we're going to go over today. We're going to look at a couple profiling commands. We're going to look at some printer issues. We're going to look at commands to see what is running. And this is a little more in depth from what I showed earlier. So, earlier I mentioned the command, and that was about all I could do with it. Here we're going to actually look at it, and I'll get through as much of that as possible. So I really encourage you to take the deck when he gives them to you, because I'll go through, and you'll find that I have a history of, I'll give you a lot more content than I can actually present to you. Right? We're going to look at SMB tools. Real problems with dealing with multiple types of network storage and how we have to access it and why we can't access it. I'm going to show you a tool that I use to kind of help figure that out. I'll show you how we can create a complete system profile that I use for debugging. And again, if I have time for questions and answers, and feel free to tackle me anytime as you see me outside. All right? So let's look at printing. So this is a common issue that I get. So I'll get a quick chat because I live in Skype for the users. So we do use a ticketing system, but how many people here, people don't like to put tickets in. They just want to go, can you fix this for me? All right, so I'll get Skype messages in my environment, and they'll say, my printing isn't working. So my discussion I have to go back to them is to say, okay, so what is it really that's not working? Is it just a printer? Is it all printers? Or is it at the file you're working with, right? So a lot of times I have to have a discussion with them. And that's the critical part about troubleshooting, especially in the command line, is get as much information as you can. Because I don't want to go down a rabbit hole that's not necessary, right? I don't want to go through and say, yeah, I'm going to reset something when I don't have to, when it was, it was just one piece that was a problem. So if a user's having issues with an individual file and not with others, then that really helps me narrow down the problem. If it's all the printers aren't working, that's a different issue. So we're going to look at some of that, and I want to show you a command that's really cool about looking at that issue. So this command, lpstat, all right? So that's line printers stats. Right? So there's a flag that I'm going to run there, and that's -A. And what it does is, you notice on this system I ran this on, it shows me that I've got a fax printer. I have a printer that's got Fiery on it. All right? So I have another printer with Fiery, and then I have 2 regular type printers. So these printers, we don't know what they are. From this right here, I know what they are because I set them up in the environment originally. But that command tells me some really critical information, like the printers are on, they're open, they're running, they're able to receive work. So if I run the lpstat command -P, all right? So now I can see whether it is active or idle, right? And that's an important concept, right? So I could see, give me a list of all the printers that are available and whether they're able to receive requests or not. So a lot of times I'll go through and I'll say, you know what, let's take a look at something. So I'm going to show you how I disable the printer, right? So I run this command, cups disable, and if you're not familiar, cups is what's running on your computer to run printers. All right, so that command, cups disable, and I'm going to say the TBHQ 4004_fiery, I'm actually going to disable that printer. So when I run the lpstat command, and now I look, you can see that that printer is now disabled. All right, and you notice it says -paused. Right, and that's important because that showed me that problem. Right? So I manufactured the problem to show you here, but what happens is mobile systems have a habit of going on networks on and off, and they may have been working actively to the printer, and because they took it off the network, sometimes it gets confused and it pauses it, right, at the very end. Now, you may not see anything listed there, but it'll clearly show you that it's disabled or paused. So to re-enable that printer, I just run this command, cups enable. I specify the printer name again, right? Then I run the lpstat command to show me that the fiery is idle, but it's not paused or disabled anymore, right? So I'm able to solve this problem for users remotely. What's even better is I actually wrote a script that I put into the self-service tools inside of Jamf, which we use for our management system, and said, so when a user calls me up, I don't have to do this physical work anymore. I just tell them, what's happening? Yeah, open up self-service. Yeah, go to IT tools. Yep, go run the resume all printers command. Oh, it's all working now. Thank you. And it'd be like, that simple. But to a user, they could never figure this out unless they're really tech savvy. And the problem is I don't give them the ability to do any of this because we don't want them to have admin rights on their systems. And that's a corporate policy, not mine. Right? So I live in that world, so it's like, okay, but I wanted you to see, you may not have that Jamf solution that I wrote available to you, but if you'd like it, email me and I will send you the script that'll do that for you. But what's really cool is if you've got a client that you really need to do this for, you can do it from anywhere in the world. You can say, yeah, I'm going to remote into your system. I'm going to look at your printers. Yep, I can see there's a printer that's bad. So this lpstat command has many more commands assigned to it. Like you can do things like, yeah, I can see what jobs are running. I can kill a job for you. There's a lot of things I can do with it, because it's tied to the system. It's underneath the hood. It's what's running, okay? All right, so now, same slide as before. Top, PS, and LSOF, right? So the top command, when we run this, now, again, if you weren't here for the first session, top, when you run this command, is one of those commands that when it's in the shell, it stays running until you tell it to stop or quit, all right? So if you're stuck there and you're like, I can't get rid of this command, it won't stop, you hit the letter Q, it'll quit the command, or Control C, and it'll kill the shell also, okay? So now we look at top command, but I want you to notice that there's a bunch of information at the very top, and I know it's hard to read it. Let me see if I can zoom in on that for you. And this is interesting, trying to work remotely on the screen. There, a little bit better? All right? So for those of you who present often, all right, that's actually just one of the tools that I turn on that enables Zoom. So that allows me to do that function, because I can never tell when I'm preparing slides how big it's going to be to the audience sometimes. So now you can see. So I have process ID. I have a command. I get CPU time, how many threads. All right. I can tell what port it's on, how much memory it's using. Right. There's a lot of information there, including the state. So what are some of the things that we can learn right away? Well, I can see the command that's running, how much CPU it's using. So if I'm running a problem where I'm trying to figure out like who's hogging my system, I'm running out of processor, right? I can actually go through and tell the top command to actually do it differently. So let's say, if you want to open on your terminals, so let's go ahead and run top. And I'm going to actually change this slide. Okay. And I want you to put the -H in, which is for help. And you notice that you're going to see that there are a bunch of flags, or verbs as I call them. Okay. And there are a bunch of keys that you can also use. Right? Those keys are important because it calls out specific functions. Now, just as the same thing, the man page is also available to you. All right? So it goes through depth. But if I wanted to look and say, what's the top memory usage, right? So I want to actually look at it. So if I look and say, top -O, and then mreg. And if you do that, what comes up? Okay. When you run that, you're going to see it's now looking at specifically the memory. It's looking at and saying how much memory or CPU is being used at that time. We can also look at it and say we want to be able to set the update so it occurs every 10 seconds instead of, right? So we can, if we ran top -S or -S, and I specify 10, that would actually tell the command top to run every 10 seconds. So it would update the screen every 10 seconds instead of constantly, all right? mreg, so M-R-E-G. Yep. You're welcome. Normally I would do this in a class where I would actually be living in terminal at the same time with them. For here it's a little different. I just got to put it up on the screen. So when you get the deck, you'll see all my notes. You can follow along what I was doing. All right. So we can also limit how many processes are in total as shown. So if I ran the command top -N and 10, when you run that, it's only going to show you 10 processes that are running. Again, it's a way of filtering the content of what I'm displaying here. Because if truth be said, if you just ran top in your terminal, in your shell, right, it'll show you, it'll fill the shell. And if you had a really large display and you just kept opening that window up, it would keep adding lines until it ran out of processes that were running. All right? So a lot of my sysadmin counterparts would often do, they have one display they run vertically. So they'll take like a 27-inch display and say, yeah, it's going to sit upright instead of horizontal. And they run top and it goes, just fills the screen. And they're watching things as it happens. All right? Now, when you're dealing with the top, it actually has 4 modes of counting events, and I want you to be aware of that. And they're being, the default one being non-event modes, which is where you could do a top -C and you specify the amount. The cumulative mode, top -A, are cumulatively since launch, are the delta mode, top -D, and then there's also a top -E, which counts with absolute. All right? These things are important, especially if you're trying to debug a problem. You can actually say, you know, I want to measure just specific functions, and cumulative or a delta of an environment. That allows me to do much more. Now, you can also gang up multiple top commands together so you don't have to do them individually. So if I wanted to say, you know, we're going to run the top -O with mreg, so M-R-E-G. Then I did a -D and a -S and said 10 and dash N and 5, when you run that command, look at the output that you get. All right. Now you can see I was able to gang up a bunch of processes in one. Yeah, I'm going to jump off this command to the next, but I appreciate that. So, all right, so the next command we're going to run is PS. PS is my friend. It really is. I use this one a lot. So if I ran the command by itself, you can see in the screen here. So if I just type in PS, it's going to tell me, basically I got a terminal open and it's running in the shell bash, right? And I'm going to try and zoom in a little bit here. Let's see, can I get that to scooch over? Which way? Right. So, yeah, still need a little bit more. All right. Working, what you don't see is I have a screen down here that I'm looking at, which shows me that screen, and I'm like, it's like, yeah. All right. Okay. So I could see, when I ran the next command I ran, which was PSAUX, that actually shows me all the users that I'm currently running on the system, what process IDs are, what their CPU, what their memory usage is, the virtual size, a bunch of different messages, including when it was started and what the time was and the path for the command itself. So it's a quick snapshot. Now, this command actually will give me a bunch of information, and there's, when I run that, there's actually a lot more than what I would see there. So if you ran that yourselves, you would actually probably see screenfuls of data, right? That is manageable because we can also apply a pipe command to that where we can say, PSAUX, the pipe command, which is the bar, and say more, all right? So you can see there, I did that. And that now shows me the data in small chunks, and I can examine it slowly, right? This is really helpful when I look at things and I'm trying to narrow down a problem, and I may be poking around because I don't know exactly where the problem is yet, so I'm trying to get an idea. All right.
What is PS? What is that showing?
Process.
Process.
Yeah, process is running. Yep. So in a kind of a summary, you can see here I did PSAUX, the bar or pipe command, grep, and I could name the process, right? So the grep is a command that says, I want to pull some data out of the string, right? So if I knew with the process ID of what I wanted to find, because I looked at it earlier and said, I saw, let's say, there was I don't know, I found one process I wanted to examine. I could actually go and say, grep that process ID number, and it would show me everything related to that. I can also look for specific applications. So if I do PSAUX, pipe, grep, and I type the name of the application. The thing I wanted to tell you here is that, and I'm going to show you a little bit more on that in a little bit, is that it's very case sensitive. So how your app is named in your applications is exactly how you have to type it. So if it's lowercase, it's lowercase. If it's upper and lowercase, it's upper and lowercase here. Because if you don't do it the same way, it won't find it. All right? Let's look at two other versions of the PS command. We're going to look at PS-EF and again the PSAUX. So AUX will show you all the processes are running in order to tell you the user, but EF will also is a way of saying, show me this. The dash E says display all the processes, and F shows the full format of the listing. Right? That's a long way of saying that. Right? So when I run the dash EF, you can see I know the user ID, the process ID, I know the start time, and what the command was. So I could see here that the launch D started on Monday, All right. I can see syslog D started again on Monday. So in other words, this was a time when the computer booted. There's lots of information here that I can pull out. All right. So again, when I'm trying to debug a problem, I'm looking through and saying, there's lots of log files to read. There's lots of information to read. So if you're gaining nothing else about this is, I do a lot of boring things over and over and over again, okay? Because I'm not using a GUI, I'm living with a terminal, all right? And that's how I'm trying to find a problem. A lot of times I'm trying to trace down a really esoteric problem. The user's not able to give me a lot of information, so I'm trying to poke around and see if I see anything that's really flagging as an error, all right? Now what's interesting is these commands that I'm running here are similar to what you would see in the console app, right? So when you launch the actual GUI console app, it's actually leveraging a lot of these commands for you, all right? So trying to run the console app on a remote user system and actually see the output is a way to do it, but it's much easier to just do it through terminal. So again, PSAUX, right? So you can see the user is now specified. Notice when I did the -EF, it named the user by the UID number, right? And now it's actually giving me the name of the user, right? So it's a good way to contrast to say who this user is and what their ID number is. So if I see 0 as the UID, who's 0? That's root, right? If I see something else, I can then trace it back. So you can see here, right? So if I was able to look at, say, what my user ID number was, and we'll see that, right? I could then go through and say, you know, show me every process that ID is running. So now I told you about grep application, right? So here's showing you, I'm going to say PSAUX pipe grep fireid. So I want to see the fireid daemon. I want to see if it's running. And if it is, it's going to tell me where it's running it from. Notice it's telling me it's from user local fireid, all right? If you're not really familiar with how the OS is put together, all right, this is one of the strongest things you can learn is kind of get the understanding of how the system is put together. So commands live in specific directories. So this command lives under user local, all right? Other times you'll find her under sbin or bin, all right? They matter, right? Because a lot of times when you're trying to find a command or run a command, if it doesn't understand where it really lives, you have to put the path statement in for it to run it. All right, so this here, it tells me, yep, when I said grep the fireid, I know exactly where it is, so if I had to run it manually, I could actually do that. All right, I'm going to run the ps command with a -u. So it displays the process that belongs to a specific user. So what I'm saying is, show me all the process for a specific user, and this is a user that I know that lives on every computer that I manage, right? That's the universal IT login user, Mac admin, right? So I can notice the UID. What's its number? It's 510, right? So I know that it's got administrative privileges, it's in the 500s, okay? And I can see everything that Mac admin is responsible for. So again, there's a lot more. I'm not showing it all, right? But I can see what that user's running. All right. So now I'm going to run it from my account. So if I did ps-u for my name, and you could see, look at the UID. It's huge. Plain and simple, it's because I'm bound to an Active Directory environment. That's my UID from AD. And I can show you that because what I did here was I took and got to the advanced options inside users and groups. Is everybody aware of that function? So if you looked at users and groups, found your account, unlocked that setting, and went advanced, you would actually see everything that was like where your home path is, all that information. So that's a screenshot of just a couple of things from that. Right? So that allowed me to see, it's like, okay, that's my process ID, or my user ID, okay? Now, let's use the ps command to find and to kill an item. So if I wanted to find, let's say, I have a suspicion that Skype is my problem. It's causing a lot of resource problems. It's hogging my machine. It's causing slowdowns. So I'm going to use the command ps-ax, okay? I'm going to pipe it to grep, and I'm going to say Skype. Now, remember when I told you the name of the app is important, how it's spelt? That's how it's found, Skype. Right? So when I did that, notice it tells me the application Skype for Business. Now, notice I didn't have to type the whole name of the app. I just did the beginning of the name. Right? It found everything else. Right? That's important also, because if I had to actually type in and say Skype for Business, in Terminal you can't do that. You cannot type a space in Terminal and have it respected as a space. It means something else. Right? So there's a trick when you're dealing with Terminal and you need to put a space in. There's a couple ways of handling it. One is you can escape it. That is, if I typed in Skype/space, right? So, so not this slash, but this slash, right? So if I did that, I could escape the space and then so I'd say Skype/0 spaceband, then for I could type, right? And you can do it, or you could surround it with quotes. So if I said, grep quote, Skype for Business with the spaces in there, close quote, it would find it also, right? It's a way of saying, find me this string as opposed to this object, right? Notice when I found the command, so when I said, all right, I'm going to look at it. Next thing I'm doing, I'm going to run a kill command on it. So I say kill, and where did the 21886 come from? Well, that's its ID. That's the process ID it's running. And that's clearly seen from the lines above. So when I did that, next I run ps, and again, basically I'm checking to see if that app is still running, and it doesn't find it any longer. Now the kill command, that's a clean kill, right? So there are ways of killing objects that are nasty, and you want to be really careful when you use the kill command, because you can do things like -9, which says no matter what, kill it. I've seen people do that to daemons, and their system just freaks out because it wants the daemon running, right? So you got to be careful, if you want to experiment on a system that if you destroyed it, it's okay, right? Because you can rebuild it, right? Trust me, in my early years, when I was in my 20s and I was learning Unix, I was working as a typesetter for a printing company, and we got this really high-end typesetting system, and it was all Unix, right? And I was given the role of saying, it's your job to take care of it. So I used to have time, and I'd sit there and go, and I'd find these directories and say, oh, what does this command do? Run it. And this is back in the days of, I had a teletype, not even a screen. So I had a teletype I was typing on, and I'd hear, ding, and then my name screamed out and saying, what did I do? Because I was running commands indiscriminately. I had no idea what they ran, right? I didn't know this stuff, right? But I learned so much about that, doing that on a regular basis. Yeah, I rebuilt that system a few times. My boss yelled at me up and down, but after a year of learning that system, doing it the hard way, that company hired me because I knew it better than a lot of their techs did, right? So there's value in playing. It's just play on something that you can destroy, not production, right? Next command, LSOF, right? Remember what that stood for? List open files. So when I run this command, right, again, I'm showing you pipe and more. Why? Because if you ran that command right now, and I encourage you to do it, it's going to go, it's going to fill your screen. It's just going to run. If you run it with the more command, it's going to be in chunks, right? So that's really helpful, because now I'm going to show you a bunch of ways, a bunch of things I can use it for, right? Because the truth is, in Unix, pipes, sockets, directories, devices, everything is a file, right? A network is a file. A file is a file. a port is a file, right? It's Unix. Everything is a file, right? So this command allows me to find those files and see what they're doing. Now, when I run that, I'm going to see one line per, I'm going to get one file per line is displayed. And you can see there's commands at the top, right? And people in the back may not be able to see it too well, but if you ran the command, you're going to see the command, process ID, the user, FD type, device size, node, and name, okay? So all those stuff means something. So if I looked at, I'm going to look at FD right now. We're going to look at FD and type. So FD represents the file descriptor. So it's some of the values of the FD are CWD, which stands for current working directory, or TXT for a text file, MEM for a memory mapped file, MMAP or mmap, which is a memory mapped device, all right? Number, which represents the actual file descriptor. It's, you know, then we also have things related to, hello, where'd my mouse go? Get my screen. Okay, the type. There's specific types of files. There's REG for a regular file, or DIR for a directory, or FIFO, first in, first out. What would that be used for? All right. Think of a network. I want to see what's first in and first out if I'm pulling something. Or CHR for character or special file. So there's a lot more information, and I encourage you to look at the manual page for LSOF, but I'm going to go through and run through some of the different command flags with you right now. So I want to list the specific processes for an open or specific file. So if I do that, so if I do LSOF, right, /var/log/ system.log, when I run that command, you're going to see that it tells me exactly where it's coming from. Now notice that I actually said to run it from var log. Where does it say it's running from? It's running it from private var log, right? So this is something that's interesting about a lot of the commands. They do live in two places. And one is a cached area that it works out of. The other one is actually where the command really lives. All right? So if I run the LSOF, and notice I say +d/var log, so what am I getting there? So I'm going to see the D option will recurse through the subdirectories also. So if I want to know what's in the var log, it's going to tell me every process that's under there that's running. Yep.
So you have to run sudo in front of that? Or?
I'm at root, and thank you for bringing it up. Yeah. So at this level, I live in root, right? It makes no sense not to. Now that does come with a caveat of buyer beware. You're in root. Some of the normal protections you expect aren't there. You say to do something, it's going to do it. It's not going to be, are you sure? Are you really sure? It's like, no, it just does it, all right? So it takes some discipline, and that's why I said it's good to practice with a system that you can destroy, because you're going to at certain points as you learn this stuff. All right? Now, if you don't want to see the recursive nature of that, you can use the +D. So that's what recursive entries. Now let's look at opening files starting with, right? So if I wanted to find, with the LSOF command, I want to specify a specific command that I want to find and a specific subset of that. So I can say, I'm going to look at SSH and init. I can actually look at and see what's running. Now you can see it's going to find my user bin SSHD. So anytime you see a command with a D in Unix, it means it's a daemon. It's a running process, right? Not just a command, all right? So you can also see that it's pulling stuff out of the Kerberos plugins. It's pulling additional files recursively out of the plugins, continuing through. So I can see DYLD, All right, so there's lots of things that I'm able to see here. All right, so if I'm actually trying to trace down a problem, I can actually say, show me everything that's running with this command, or starting with. All right. Now what if I want to say what's running off of a mount point? All right, so if I say lsof/volume/Brooks, so what I did was I actually have a network share called Brooks for one of my sites. I actually mounted it for this example, so it is a Windows share. So when I run that command, it's going to tell me that it was mounted under volumes. So if you're not familiar, when you do mount something through the GUI, it puts it under /volumes, and the path or the name it displays. All right. If I want to see open files by a user, now I see here I put -u, the user, and I can see all the files that are opened by me, or app processes. All right. Again, that's not all of it, that's just a sample of it. Or a specific process. All right. Again, so I could run, saying, run this command, list all the open files by a process ID of that, and it goes through and it shows me everything related to it. Now, if I wanted to kill off a process by a user, all right, so here, notice that infamous command I told you about, kill -9, right? And I'm going to say lsof by -t-u Lincoln. What it's going to find is it's going to find every process that's running under that user and kill it. Now, if I ran that while I was logged in, what would happen? Don't do it. Yeah, basically, it would kick me out, all right? So, yeah, you can be really nasty to people. It's like, listen, you keep annoying me, I'm going to, right in the middle of your work, I'm going to kick you out, all right? Then look for a new job, because I'm sure it's going to have repercussions, all right? If I want to look at see what open network connections there are, so this is really cool. So I use this a lot when I'm trying to trace down a real troublesome problem. So I'll see lsof-i, and notice that it's looking here, and again, lots more than what's on the screen. So you can see launch D, which is how the system starts up everything, and it's, notice I'm finding, I want to see everything related that's tied to a port. So SSH is listening, right? So it's waiting for a response, it's waiting for input. Right? There's also, look at, I got NetBIOS. What, do we have NetBIOS on the Mac? Not by default, all right? That's a Windows protocol, all right? But since I'm bound to an Active Directory environment, there is NetBIOS, right? I can see TCP/IP, UDP, and I can see which port it's being assigned to, all right? There's a lot more, so I can examine. I often use this when I'm trying to figure out, like, is there something on their system that's talking outside? I'm trying to trace down a problem, right? If I want to look for the network files for a specific process, I can actually run this command to do that, right? So, which port is listening? Again, really cool. So I use this when I'm looking for malware on a computer. So if I suspect there's some type of a bot running on the computer, I will go through and I'll do this to trap all of the ports to see what's running. And even though it may, I often will find, like, hey, you got something running that shouldn't be running. Right? I can trace it down saying it's actively polling outside. So you can see, right? It gives me a path. So this is really cool. Yes, in that example, right? So you want to know the names of the ports. So 443 is what's used for secure shell or SSH. You might look at like port 25 for like mail, right? 80 is for web, right? So there, if I didn't list all the ports, I could put that in the resources later, so when you get it, I'll list all the ports available for you. Okay. If I want to look at what TCP or UDP, right, again, same thing. I can see what's listening. I can see what's actively working. Right? So we've seen a lot of things that LSOF can do, right? List open files. But let's talk about one of my favorites, SMB troubleshooting. All right? So if you haven't noticed, AFP has been really deprecated for a long time. AFP was what Apple used to talk to their own server. So if you had an Xserve, all your shares there were set up as AFP. And by default, the Mac, when you said connect to server, it was leveraging AFP to do that. Right? There's actually a website that it's dedicated to that originally. It was AFP 548, 548 being the port it uses for AFP. All right? So, but the Mac now uses SMB, but what version of SMB? Well, so I put this up here for you to, as a kind of a guide. So SMB1 was originally meant for, right, say Windows 2000. Prior to that, it was probably CIFS. So SMB1 replaced CIFS, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that. So version 2 of SMB is for 2008 in Vista. 2.1 was for server in Windows 7. Then version 3 was for server 2012 and Windows 8, and so on, right? So CIFS is the ancient version of SMB, right? The Mac still uses that command. But if I opened up the man page for that, so I want to show up and say SMB util is a command I want everybody to learn, right? This command is capable of doing lots of neat things when I want to examine my network connections or for shares, right? So this is a command that I use to test a share to see what protocols it's actually using. So when I run the SMB util, and I say stat shares -a, notice what it does is I have this network volume. It's called B Footwear. It's for my folks at Timberland, right? It's for because they're footwear apparel designers. This network share is where they store a lot of stuff. So I can see the name of the server. I can see the UID that's being used for it. I can see, now look at the SMB negotiate. I can see that it can negotiate via level 1, level 2, level 3, but the current version it's actually using is 3.02. Right? So that's my computer requesting the back-end server to tell me how am I connecting to you and what services do you actually support. So it tells me I can connect to for version 1, 2, and 3 of Samba or SMB. Okay. But currently I'm using 3.02 because that's the operating system version that's running for that, all right? I can see that it's a disk that I've mounted. Signing is supported, meaning it's signing the packets. So the data going between the two devices is signed, so I know there's no man-in-the-middle attack occurring. There's nobody trying to snoop those packets. They're all signed. They're secure, right? It is all these things I can look. DFS, I can see if it's supported. So if you're not familiar with using distributed file systems, it's a way of saying in the Windows world, they can say, I am going to give you a portal that says this network data is going to be shared across several servers, but you don't know which one you're actually reaching. So it acts as let's say, as a gateway. So a DFS share would say, yeah, I got a bunch of resources behind me where the data really lives, but I'm not telling you which one I'm going to, right? In the Windows world, it works really well. In the Mac world, until fairly recently, it was a nightmare, right? It's improved over time, but it's still an issue that I run into. Yes, so if I had more than one network share mounted, and that's a great comment, so I only mounted one network share to show that. I didn't want to mount too much because I can't put it on the screen, right? Now, this is, what I did was I dismounted that, and I mounted that same network share, but this time I used the CIFS command to do it, so I said CIFS in that path, and notice the difference immediately. It's negotiating SMB1, it's enabled, it connected as SMB1. I don't see SMB2 and SMB3 because it doesn't support it. So I got about 5 minutes. I got to get, I'm over. Okay. So I need an earpiece where you can scream at me and say, speed it up.
5 minutes, Leon.
Thank you. All right. This is here to show you the versions of SMB supported on the Mac, but I also list, the Windows version, the Mac version, and the Linux or BSD version. So it tells you what the highest version it'll run, and the lowest version. This is really helpful if you're trying to figure out what can run on your computer. I could tell you that if you're trying to run SMB packet signing, right, and you're having connection problems or where it just won't really happen, there's a way of turning that off, and that's an article there that Apple wrote to turn off packet signing, right? So I found that to solve problems in certain filer types. I don't recommend it as an option, but it's available if you need it. And I won't have time to really go over, but if I wanted to create a complete system profile on a user's system, this is the command I would run, sysdiagnose. And when you run that, it's actually going, this is the tool Apple would tell you if they needed to debug a problem for you. It collects all the logs, all the settings. It collects every piece of information about your computer. Right? And when I do it, when I ran it, you can see, and I'm going to just bounce through the screens, you can see it's tremendous amounts of data it's collecting. All right. And when it gets to the very end, it compresses the file and puts it, it tells me where it is. I could then use SCP or secure copy and say, give me that file from the remote system, bring it back to my own, uncompress it, and I would get a directory with all the P lists, all the settings that are for a user system. I use this for a problem that I'm really trying to trace down. I have no idea. I will sit there and read every one of those files. Right? When I tell you I do lots of boring things over and over again, that's boring, but it's effective because I will find problems. And I did get to the very end, and they're not going to shoot me for going too long.
Not that you know of. But the good news is that Leon loves to talk to everybody, and he'll be in the lobby. He'll be signing autographs immediately after the presentation. How about a big hand for Leon?